has changed. This is the beauty of where we're at is a place called the center of Wichita, and they're still under construction. The room that we're going to end up in is the next room over. It's really pretty. They got a lot of it done, but we're using this little conference room. Well, it's still kind of in flux and changing. So last week, for instance, we had the board up against a different wall. This week it's actually mounted on a completely different wall, so we had to change all of our setup. Yeah, it's been a slow start today. So sorry if you've been hanging around. And oh yeah, and apparently I have to be exactly a hand width away from the wall, otherwise it starts cutting my head off. Fun! So anyways, so we apologize for the delay, and well, you know what, for the next 3 or 4 times that we do it, just kind of expect a little bit of delay when we get started, because apparently things are just going to go wrong. So apologize about that, though. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about eco-stewardship, and a little bit of it from the real world, and some of it from what does it mean biblically. If you've never heard the term eco-stewardship, stewardship is the caring of the things that God gives us. Eco-stewardship in particular is caring for the environment and the earth that we live on, this gift that God has given us. And I'm going to kind of preface this just a tad, because it keeps coming up in conversation. You hear the terms conservative and liberal. And I'm going to, must have one of my markers for this. The problem is that in our political arena, and trust me, everything about eco-stewardship is political these days, unfortunately. It should be self-evident, but it's not. Conservative is actually just resistance to change. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It means a traditionalist, somebody who sticks with the ideas that already exist. They resist a certain amount of change, or if they're going to support change, it's going to be something that goes back to what was previously traditional. There's actually nothing wrong with conservatism. Now the problem is that in the United States we've taken this word to mean something else entirely. For some people that means Republican idiot. For some people that means those that are, well, honestly, for some people it means terms like racist even sometimes, because conservatives don't want other cultures entering our country. What it really is supposed to mean, though, is just somebody who's a traditionalist. We use liberal as the flip side of that. Actually, that's not actually quite right. Liberal is actually not the opposite of conservative when it comes to the base terms. When it means the difference between traditionalist, actually is progressive, is the opposite of it. Liberal, in a political state, on the other hand, means supporting larger government, et cetera, et cetera. There's quite a few things. Supporting the ideas of change. But actually the word should have been progressive, and progressives are a totally different thing in our political system now. The reason why I mention this is because there's a whole lot of conservative and liberal that goes into the discussion of eco-stewardship now. There really shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be a political matter for the most part. It should just be, for us as believers, it should just be a spiritual matter. What do we believe that we have to do, or do not have to do, or should not be doing as part of our stewardship of the earth? So anyways, I wanted to bring that up. Oh, there's, at both ends of the spectrum, you also have the other guys, the ultra-conservatives and the ultra-liberals, who are people that usually just can't have a conversation with anymore. And if you really want to know, if you actually care, that's about where I am. I'm mainly a moderate. I don't think either side's right completely on any issue. So I tend to be just a little bit liberal, on the liberal side of moderate. Anyways. Honey, would you hand me a napkin so I can... What is this? I'm going to buy one of those handy erasers.
Why?
I don't know. It seems like a good idea. I keep wasting these things for...
Okay. Topical.
You're right. Actually, it is topical. Here I am wasting these every time that I do one of these whiteboard things. Anyways, so getting on topic. To get on topic, then we have to. I'm going to ask the question: what does everybody know about the ideas of global climate change, global warming, that sort of thing?
Can you restate the question?
What do you know about global warming?
What do I know, or how do I feel about it?
What do you know? What can you give me on a factual basis? Or at least what you think is fact. I will make that separation.
The concept of the ozone having some problems, and so the greenhouse gases are causing opportunities for making it warmer inside of our atmosphere, raising the mean temperature. Hot car syndrome.
Events.
That's pretty much it. Carbon dioxide is reflecting excess heat back towards the Earth, trapping it, increasing the temperatures. Other chemicals are destroying the ozone layer, which allow ultraviolet lights to come through.
Chlorofluorocarbons.
Mm-hmm.
CFCs.
Oh, come on. I would have write this whole thing down.
To let it dry.
It's not that hard. No apostrophes, not possessive.
You're right. I'm sorry. The English major speaks.
Two apostrophes.
Okay. That's
Did you say two apostrophes?
He did.
Yes.
Wow.
Just for that look on my face.
Wow. Griefing the English major, too. I like this game. All right. So CFCs cause problems with the ozone layer.
And as he stated suddenly, though, Marshall said the trapping excess heat, we're also making we're making heat, so it is an excess of the normal planet life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the wrong one.
Excess heat generation.
Indigenous life forms.
No, I didn't hear what you
I
said.
said by indigenous life forms, accelerating temperature.
Well, but it's other things. It is man-made structures, but it's also, the desert reflects more heat than a jungle, but so does a cement desert.
Cement actually will reflect more heat back and more light back than will any desert.
Right, but I'm just saying, but the desert does too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's graded.
And people know that this happens because there's heat islands that they've studied. I mean, they can even see it on the small scale, but I mean, large scale change to the planet has been happening. Before the Industrial Revolution, silver didn't tarnish except for over extreme time frames because there wasn't enough sulfur in the air.
I did not know that one.
Well, I happen to have a relative that is pretty educated in jewelry history, so it just happened to know.
That's fascinating.
But,
I actually want to look that up sometime now.
Yeah, there wasn't enough sulfur in the air, and then there was. That's why silver and gold used to be, sort of interchangeable in value, except that they found a lot more silver over time, and it started tarnishing.
How interesting. I did not know that one. That's good. Fascinating.
And there's also the concept, do not let us silly little humans. A planet will change and evolve over time regardless. So when people say there's measurable change, I'm like, well, yeah, because something happened between, even 0 and 1000 AD. there's things change.
Well, take the Nile for instance. I mean, if you want to talk about especially localized change, if you want to talk about localized change, the Nile is a great example of that. In Egypt, at one time, you had the Nile would come off its banks. It would fertilize the ground and moisturize it, and they had fertile crops. But over time, that changed. You didn't end up with as much water in the Nile. It slowed down. It was no longer flooding its banks. Once it quit doing that, you ended up with desertification.
So, and there's other rivers that just change course over time because of the rain that erode rocks, waterfalls. I mean, even in the lifespan of a simple human, you can watch waterfall change as the rocky roads. There's a lot of things that just change. So let us all be careful of the concept of change versus bad change.
And we're going to get into that.
And then also what stupid humans trying to keep control of change.
In fact, I'm going to skip ahead on my list here just for a second, because there's one of the debates that comes off of the conservative side is the idea, because you just barely touched on it, is the idea that we don't really have any control over it anyways. We don't do anything. We can't do things on a large enough scale to cause changes in climates, for instance.
Why did God put us in charge of maintaining things for the other life forms?
That's a great question. I mean, if we can't
change, then we don't have any responsibility.
But I can give you one piece of proof, absolute proof, that we can change the environment, and we have before, in a very detrimental fashion. I can never say the word completely. Everybody familiar with leaded gas?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Familiar with what the problem with leaded gas was?
Lead.
Yeah, that was the word right there. Lead. Lead. Lead is an interesting problem because we actually seen this in history before. The Romans, part of the fall of the Roman Empire was lead piping because it causes people to lower their intelligence, psychosis, all sorts of mean and nasty things start to happen. So we decided we needed a way of improving gasoline. Back in, I think it was 1938. I don't have it pulled up at the moment, but it was 1938. And the problem with this was, so we started burning this stuff in every car. It became an additive. Then there was an alternative. Oddly enough, we use the alternative these days, which was ethanol. Ethanol actually performed about the same function, just not as profitable is actually what it was, because there was a set of patents on what is it? They name it. Tetraethyl lead. Thank you. Tetraethyl lead was the name for it. There was a set of patents on it, so it was in somebody's best interest for it to go to tetraethyl lead. Anyways, so we started doing this. It wasn't until some guy got this brilliant idea that he was going to use carbon dating to measure how old the Earth was. So a lot of really old rocks from digs, and get as far down as he could, started sampling these things. His equipment kept failing him. Every sample had lead in it. That's odd. So he starts working in a clean room. The samples are handled as a clean room situation where basically it's being pulled out of the ground without the atmosphere attached to it, et cetera, et cetera. Then he finally gets his answers. But he kept wondering, why did all my previous samples have lead in it? Because the entire atmosphere had lead. We had so much lead in the atmosphere, actually we were already starting to reach a point where there was concern, once they realized what was happening, there's been a concern, if we had not have stopped, our IQs would have actually continued to drop radically. The amount of violence and psychoses would have continued to climb. In fact, there's a lot of things attributed to the increase of intelligence in America, the drop in violence, despite what the news will tell you. Actually, violence is always on a downward trend in the U.S. Since the late 70s. When they stopped. And that's one of the questions is, well, did this factor in or not? Well, nobody knows for certain, but we do know this. We put so much lead into it that we literally could not pick a rock up off the ground without finding lead on it. So we do have the ability, positive or negative, to change it. You know, we don't know how, to what effect we can change things, but we do know that we can change things. We've already seen it happen in modern history. It wasn't just a fluke. There's actually a whole bunch of other examples of things like that. Britain during the Industrial Revolution, set of moths that existed. They were white moths. Eventually, they became black moths until the end of the carbon era for them, where they started cleaning all the smokestacks, and you no longer could have black smoke coming out of them. Selective breeding ended up being back to white moths again. We've seen that again in modern history. We've seen our effects on things. So anyway, so I wanted to mention that because that's one of the debates within it, is that, well, what does it matter because we can't change it anyway? I mean, we can change things on a large scale.
Also a dangerous line of thinking. I mean, yes, the environment does change on its own and everything, but just to chalk it up to we can't do anything, so why should we stop what we're doing? It's extremely dangerous.
Well, and there's a lot of things that in our history, and that's a conservative thought. And I'm not knocking conservative thought. There are good things about conservatism. But for instance, there has been a number of points in history where we can't change this because this is how it is. How it is not how it has to be. Anyways, the other thing that's happening with this is, and it's unfortunate, and this is where it bugs me in the standpoint of churches and things like that, is that because churches tend to go with conservatism, in this particular debate, and I say it in this particular debate because I'm not getting into the whole ideal. So what?
Politics?
Yeah, I try to stay out of the politics of this, but it's hard to. In fact, actually, while I was doing this, I believe in looking at both sides of an argument. Very much believe in that. And so I spent a bunch of time researching, and today I finally posted about it, and because I was really irritated and a bit disappointed because I was reading all this stuff. And if I wanted to read on climate change a paper, or if I want to find a paper on climate change that actually cites its sources, things like that, that's not a problem. Not a problem. There's tons. Well, I'm not going to say every article. For instance, the Rolling Stone magazine article I read cited no sources for anything. In fact, actually, it had quite a few errors in it. But when I would go to the conservative ones, I would find this trend of a lot of stuff that was written with no data. And then if I did find data, it was actually the data came from somebody's blog, and there was no supporting evidence beyond, hey, did you see that last year it was actually a little cooler than the year before? I'm not sure if you understand the idea of a trend. A trend is not. That's kind of what our temperatures look like. It's horrible, horrible. We base it, actually, off the median. Because if I pick this year, let's say this is et cetera, et cetera. If I go off just per year, then last year was cooler. Last year was a lot cooler. Obviously, there's nothing to this. The year before, yeah, we had a hot year the year before. But that's not important. That's basically what a lot of these things were saying. Well, you don't need to worry about anything but what I tell you to worry about. The scientific ones, the more scientific ones, would show this graph. Hey, this is what it is over time. We're obviously doing this. We don't, and including some people, right, because you get to the very end. You'll notice a little bit of leveling off that I was showing up there. Trying my best to simulate this. If I could, I'd project this. Someday we will have a projector. It would actually show that at the last 5 years, there's actually a little bit of a flattening at the top. And some people say, yeah, I don't know why. But we can see the rest of the curve. So anyways. So I'm seeing all this data on one side, and the other side, and it's lies and repetition of lies. And this is so so much blows my mind because we're taught not to bear false witness. This is false witness. When we say things like, "Hey, don't worry about the rest of that day. It's only this year that you need to worry about." That's not being truthful. That's not being honest. And all of these blogs are sitting there repeating it, and I'm watching people I know, on a person-to-person basis on Facebook, repeating some of these things. They're not true. They're half-truths. So mixed in with all of this, again, I don't want to get into politics, but geez, they make it hard not to. That we're getting into the church politics of conservatism, because apparently we'll repeat anything that we hear enough times without actually bothering to check our sources. So a lot of these blogs and things like that I was doing during the research, or there's one worse. There's actually one worse because it was actually flat out lies. There's a guy that you'll run into if you start looking for global warming as a hoax or global climate change as a hoax. There's a guy you'll run across by the name of Robert M. Carter. He's written some papers. Nobody, but oddly enough, these papers are not well accepted. That doesn't necessarily mean much by itself, because there are people who stand up and say, "I don't agree with this, and this is why." And that's the good people to have. So show me what you mean. Well, come to find out, he actually works for. He's paid by a group called the Heartland Institute. You decide. You know who those are. Those are the same guys that Philip Morris went to try and debunk every claim that smoking causes cancer. They routinely are paid, and they pay scientists to have contrarian opinions. To the point that somebody made this beautiful graph. This number, 1,000, 10,000. We're going to say 10,800. I'm off by about 86. I think it's 10,886 papers printed in 2013 that are peer-reviewed papers. Peer-reviewed means that other scientists looked at them and went, "Hey, you're not stupid." Well, there's papers that get written that
Get thrown out.
Yes. There's reasons. There's reasons why they get thrown out. The idea of being of being contrarian is not bad, but at this point, of 10,800 and some odd papers, 2 of them were against global warming, and of those 2, and those are peer-reviewed papers, 2 of them actually stood against it. So a lot of that stuff that we're hearing is just really kind of BS off people's head that doesn't mean much. And it's unfortunate because it means we're perpetuating laws. So I'm going to say at this point, we're going to pretend for a moment that this is right, that it is global warming. Global warming is happening. That we really have increased temperature by 1.4 degrees over the last 100 years. I believe it's 100 years. No, it's less than that. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have it up. We've increased temperature, blah, blah, blah. Let's just pretend that we all agree on that. You guys are going to nod your head at me. It's like you sort of do anyways. Nobody said, no, you're full of it. So if we all agree on this, so the question becomes, is there anything that biblically says that we're supposed to do something about this? Is there really something that says we should do anything about it? Any candidates?
Well, we're supposed to be managing the resources. There's that of course, the thing in Genesis with us having control of the animals and all of that. I disagree with the word dominion, but they have translated it that.
Some of them do.
And there is, every time Israel screwed up, there was talk about how the animals would take it back over because because they would be punished and the animals would move in.
Well, and there was actually a trend about every 40 years. Israel would screw up, and well, they were in a lot of trouble. They lose the land, and then they come back again. You know, keeps going back and forth. So yeah.
And depending on how bad they screwed up was how long the land had to be left alone before they got to touch it again.
Yeah. So there's that.
But there's also the parable about the vineyard, about the bad managers in the vineyard getting thrown out. Now, granted, it also had to do with, murdering the son of the owner, but mismanagement has been discouraged.
Well, actually, I'll tell you what. I'll give you a less violent one of those then.
Okay.
It's a little long, but it's a little less violent, which is Matthew 25:14 through 30. Give me just a second to pull it up. What have my books rearranged? Sorry, that's 25. Okay, this is actually a little bit long, but this comes from Jesus. For it is like a man going on a journey who summons his slaves and entrusts his property to them. To one he gives 5 talents, to a talent being coin, 5 talents. To another he gives 2, and to another 1, each according to his ability. The one who has received 5 talents went off right away to put his money to work and gained 5 more. The one who received, in the same way, the one who received 2 talents gained 2 more. But the one who had received 1 talent went out and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled his accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came and brought 5 more, saying, "Sir, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained you 5 more." The master says, "Well done, good and faithful slave. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." The one with 2 talents also came and said, "Sir, you have entrusted me with 2 talents. You entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more." His master answered, "Well done, good and faithful slave. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." Then the one who received the 1 talent came and said, "Sir, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you do not sow, and gathering where you do not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours." The master answered, "Evil and lazy slave. So you knew that I harvest where I did not sow, and I gather where I did not scatter. When you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10. For the one who has will be given more, and he will have more than enough. But the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw the worthless slave into the outer darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Not quite as violent as the vineyard one, but pretty much exactly the same concept, though. So what does it mean? I mean, how does it apply here? Is it that we're supposed to be investing our money, or is it that we're supposed to be tending our master's things?
Well, I would expect that we should show some respect for what we've been given, not poison everybody, and
Fair enough. Fair enough.
he did kind of give us the animals to take care of and the people that are here. And if we, suddenly don't have air to breathe, granted, we'll be roasted long before that. But
Well, the select few refrigerated areas.
The ones with all the money.
Well, that's the point. And is that a lot of these things, these select few could survive just about anything.
Yeah.
If you got enough money and resources.
What depresses me is, there are people out there who pick and choose amongst the verses, and they would pick that as just straight money.
Yeah, shows profit. Shows profit.
Shows profit, do anything for money, Which, it's like, I can do anything for money. I don't care what actually is happening to everybody else, as long as I'm making more money because I'm doing what God commanded. That's fine.
So what?
I said, as long as I'm making more money, I'm doing what God commanded, so I'm holy.
Gotcha.
And
that's the view that some people do have. Mm-hmm. Well, it's easy to take these parables, both in Old Testament and New Testament, and just apply to what you want them to apply to. It's pretty easy to do that.
Fatwa shopping.
Yeah, pretty much.
Terrible shopping.
I like the ones where I can stone people, I think I'm just going to stick with those.
I'm going to sell my daughters because I'm sick of them.
Did you get a good price?
Well, and then I doubled it.
No, you didn't.
Oh, jeez. This was not right.
And that man's going to be struck by lightning.
That's why I say indoors. Oh, wait, that man.
And there's a couple of good ones, even from the Old Testament. There's try that again in English. The earth is the Lord, and earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world, and all who live in it. Psalms 21:41. Psalms 24:1. Did I ever mention I'm actually dyslexic? This makes this a lot harder sometimes. To the Lord your God belongs the heavens, everything in the highest heavens, the earth, and everything in it. By the way, this is actually one that I always like, because actually it also falls with a number of other cultures, including some Native American thought. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you are but aliens and my tenants. There's a much longer one. Well, Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So, I mean, even from the very beginning, this is not like a new thought. Some people get a little weird because it says that some of the things are just Greek thought anyways. They were just bringing stuff in. There's stuff Paul wrote because it's just Greek thought. Well, that's stuff that was the very, very, very beginning. The idea that we're having to take care of it starts from the very beginning. So it seems to me, okay. So then I guess the question becomes, what all things are we supposed to do? I mean, what is there an answer? Is there really an answer for us biblically of what we're supposed to do? Well, I don't really have an answer for that personally. You guys have the answers. People are just looking at me. This is the moment I get uptight, by the way. It's when I go, hey, what do you guys think? They're staring.
Sure.
Well, I'm just thinking, is this like when Time Magazine said that I was the person of the year? You have the answer. Power is in you.
Yes, we do not depend on Captain Planet around here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's made pretty clear clear in the Bible that there's a certain kind of government that God would like people to have. So, say that line with Jesus telling the disciples that the pagan leaders lord it over their subjects, but they're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to be servants to their subjects. If they want to be leaders, they have to serve everyone. That is one of the passages I think is pretty important in perspective. I mean, if we were actually doing that sort of thing, it would be a lot better world. I mean, we call the leaders civil servants, but they don't always care.
Especially the higher up you go.
Pop quiz. Remember what a member of Congress makes a year? 260,000?
Yeah, I was thinking 235.
It's hard to consider yourself a servant when you're that far above everybody you represent.
Well, I mean, even some wealthy people do actually care about other people,
Yes.
but if there's like one person doing it and not...
All it takes is sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of the wealthiest men in the world right now
If
have taken
there's
them.
one person poisoning the well and everybody drinks out of the well, it's still poison.
Absolutely right. Absolutely
That's
right.
why there are laws about poisoning
I'm
in
sorry,
water.
that's what I was saying. You know, I wasn't saying it just takes a few people doing good. It takes that's all it takes is a few bad people to screw everything up. And if you have one of the people who have the more control of the world, which is the way capitalism works at this particular moment, I mean, they can pollute, they can do whatever they want, and everybody else can be sitting there with their mouth agape going, why are you doing this? And you can't stop them.
Yeah.
Because they got the money.
Well, and
They've doubled it.
Yeah. And actually,
Sorry.
but by the way, there's actually a whole lot of Old Testament stuff about yeast.
Yeah. A little yeast poisoning the whole thing.
Exactly.
Or getting through the...
And I'm not going to generalize and say wealthy people are yeast and that all of them are bad. Far from it. There have been guys who have done what I was considered unscrupulous things. Take Bill Gates. Bill Gates was not a good man for a long time. On the other hand, he got to a point in his life where he went, wait, I got how many billion? And I'm going to do nothing with it?
Mm-hmm.
How about I give a bunch of it away? In fact, how about I give 80% of it away? And Warren Buffett and a number of other guys got together and decided it was time to change how some of that works. Unfortunately, that's a small group right at the moment. Mm-hmm. But I would not say, in generalization, all of them are bad or anything. So I just made that parallel and then realized, man, I was calling a whole lot of people bad things.
It's just that...
And it's also like saying that all the poor are good people, too.
Like...
There's some of them that aren't.
With criminals, there aren't very many people that are really, truly, exorcist evil,
Yeah.
But if there's one person that's really, really evil, they can do a lot of harm. Which is, I'm sure, why we have laws.
When I was taking sociology in college, I had a teacher that actually worked with the prison systems. This is what he did. A little old man, he was incredibly smart and really fun to take a class with. And one of the things he talked about was the prison system. And it kind of falls into that because he talked about the fact that actually what we were doing is we were putting people into the prison system and getting back better criminals. Mm-hmm. Because they go in for petty things. Well, one, they're not going to get a job when they come out. It's hard to get a job after you've been to prison. And two, well, while they're in there, they learn to be sneakier. They learn to lie better. They learn sometimes some skills and some trades that we wish they wouldn't. So yeah, that one person in there that's, been a number of things. I'm not even going to go through a list of things that just went through my head. Can pass on their bad thing, the bad apple in the group, the yeast and the dough, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it does. Your servitude thing, by the way, kind of caught me. Because we are supposed to be in servitude of the Lord, we're also supposed to be in servitude of our government and of our fellow man, et cetera, et cetera. We are supposed to be servitude of everything. And the people in charge, as you pointed out, are also supposed to be subservient to us. They are our servants. They are to take care of our needs. That's the reason
if they're
why.
Christians.
If they're Christian. You know what? I think it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because the way we set up the system, we're supposed to be representative of us. So even if they're atheist, they're still representative of us. They're still subservient to us. They still go back to that term you used, civil servant. So it ends up being this big circle where we're all supposed to be subservient to everyone else. It doesn't matter whether you're in leadership or not. It was a random thought, so I'd drawn that, so I would come back to it a bit. Now, oddly enough, I do have a harder time when it comes to that bit. Have a harder time, like Old Testament. It's hard to find good examples of that, though, because of the stratification with the system. The Levites, they were this. They were to talk most directly to God in a lot of ways, but they were instead of subservient of society, they were at the mercy of the society. That if people didn't do their tithes or what have you, they go hungry because they didn't own lands, they didn't own property, they didn't own livestock or anything else. They weren't allowed to. So.
But that was the higher ups in the church being not the super powerful elite,
True. Because the amount of separation.
People were nicer, and they actually took care of them and didn't just go, well, you're on your own.
That's true. And let's face it, there was also less of a separation. I mean, in a lot of ways. Even in, I'm not going to get into the 1% versus 90% here. I'm going to talk, I will mention, however, the churches, the amount of there are some churches, the likelihood that you will actually that you can talk to, have a sit-down conversation with the guy who actually is up there and does the speaking. Mm-hmm. There's some of the very large churches, there's so much separation, you're probably never going to get to be able to do that. And that's why I like smaller groups anyways, is because, with where I used to go, I would go talk to Rabbi. If I had a problem, I could say, hey, Rabbi, can I talk to you for a minute? It's not a problem. Or one of the other leadership, if I had an issue with what they were doing, I could talk to them pretty easily. But the larger that separation gets, the harder it is to keep that
mindset.
Yeah, to keep that whole circle kind of going. So. Now, I've had that moment, that seizure apparently, where I've suddenly gone where we were going.
Yeah, I was just looking at the whiteboard that was white and going, and now there was nothing.
There.
And now
everyone focus on the dot. We have found the point.
English puns.
Why? Because I can. Anyways, back on topic. So, I guess the question becomes, if we're stewards of the earth, that also means that we're also somewhat subservient to it too. It's not that we should be changing everything around us all the time. So sometimes we need to be looking at it as, hey, this is God's creation. Maybe we should be melding ourselves with it more than trying to change it. And there's actually a school of thought in a lot of churches that goes absolutely against that because anything paganism is completely and utterly wrong and bad. Going back to that thing that I mentioned when I was going through pieces in Leviticus, Genesis, Deuteronomy, that you weren't supposed to sell the land permanently. And I mentioned that was actually a Native American thought. You don't really own the land. and it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the land.
Mhm.
But if you say it in a Native American way, some people get offended because it's paganism. If you think of the idea that we should be subservient to a certain degree to the earth, that's paganism. That's what pagans do. They march around trees and things like this.
Well, there was also the verse where Paul was telling the Romans that they had no excuse for not knowing God's qualities, because their proof was all around them. That they could see the sky, they could see the world, they could see proof.
Yes. Well,
So
if the
you
being
can't
is alpha,
totally
Go ahead.
separate it. I mean, you're not supposed to worship the land itself, but just like you can see somebody's personality in their drawing or their signature or whatever they make, there's a parallel. I mean, you can if you want to study God, of course you're going to be interested in what a tree looks like, or how the animals behave, or
yeah,
the laws of the universe.
that's actually a fairly interesting way to think of looking at it. I hadn't thought about it that way. The laws of the universe part has occurred to me many times, but the rest of that, yeah, no, I haven't thought about that. If we want to know God better, we look around us.
And in order
Makes
to
sense.
understand a lot of the parables, I mean, there's a lot of stories that probably don't make a lot of sense if you have no grounding on what weeds and wheat look like, or one of my favorite sayings about Jesus was I wanted to gather you guys together like a hen gathers her chicks. It's like, but you wouldn't let me. Like, wow.
If you've never dealt
Who
with a farm,
cares?
if you've never dealt with a farm, it might be a little bit mystifying. What is he talking about?
Oh, what's a chick?
Should have been
Isn't
herding
that a
cats.
girl? Oh, sorry.
No.
Sorry.
All you did was say what your husband was thinking.
So yeah, I'm gonna let you talk now.
No. Everybody's welcome to talk. Problem is that every once in a while I just go blank.
It's the board. It's blank. You need to write something on the board. Something.
Now that.
Now that there's something on the board.
One of the other, and I consider this is not a conservative piece of thought. This is an ultra-conservative piece of thought. This is where I start running into people I consider to be kooks. The idea that everything that's happening, for instance, hurricanes, earthquakes, etc., are all God's punishments. And okay, I can't say that that's true or not true, but it seems like to me, if we're harming the environment, God doesn't even have to intervene. That doesn't even have to happen. If we raise the ocean temperatures, we get more hurricanes. If we take this stuff out of the ground and we pump in something else, we get some earthquakes. If we do these various things, He doesn't even have to punish us. We end up punishing ourselves as an overall society. That's my thought. Now, the problem I've got, I don't really have a biblical basis for that. I don't know if either of you have any thought on that, because I really couldn't find that. That's not an easy thing to just
I
kind of
haven't
flip
seen a
through.
biblical basis for fracking, no.
And thou shalt pump the oil from the earth and replace it with toxic stuff.
I think there was a part where it was talking about
Black
everything
hole,
being poisoned,
Texas tea.
but I can't remember.
Revelations has got
Specifics.
some mentions of that.
Like the earth being like an old shirt or garment or whatever. That's, I guess.
See, where's Kaylin when we need it?
Sorry,
Man's
man.
got an encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff some days. See if I can find a good reference to
I keep waiting for something to pop up in group chat, thinking maybe he's out there watching.
that.
I don't know.
I don't know. Can you watch from work?
That's a good point. Probably not.
Yeah, I know some people that have jobs that could easily get away with that.
I mean, I got a buddy who works in Texas, and that's all he does all night. No names.
I've got a friend of mine that works for a company not mentioned that Joe does tech stuff, and you know what he does? He griefs people on Facebook because that's all he's got to do.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to sit around and wait for problems to come up if it's your job to fix problems.
At least he's not actively causing them, so he'll have something to do.
And this is why I like First Geek. You'll see Davis grab his PDA tablet, his cell phone. If we were in an actual church and you were behind a pulpit or anything, you'd never see anybody. You'd never see a rabbi or a priest reach out and say, "Hold on, let me check Facebook."
Well, I wasn't checking Facebook.
I know that. But
Funny story. Funny that you mentioned that. Because where I used to go, the guy actually used to work for NASA at the time. He's got a couple of degrees, not in aerospace, and he's kind of a geek. He's a 65-year-old geek. He saw my iPad. I showed him that I had the Tanakh on there. It's like, I've got it. So how much did that cost? I don't know. It was like 2 months later, Rabbi shows up with his iPad and has carried it around ever since. He will be up there talking.
nice.
There's part of where I got that from, because he saw the iPad, thought that was awesome, and thought my Bible on there was awesome. So he would take and put his reference material on there. That, or he'd have the laptop up there. So
Technology is not all bad, you know. It's not all pumping pressurized water into the ground. Well, and besides, I mean, it's an iPad is a book. It is literature and reference, you know. I mean, they're unless you want to be a conservative about it, there's really no difference between having a Bible or, you know, propped up on the pulpit, open to a certain page, or
a laptop,
or an iPad.
Yeah.
Especially like an iPad, because it can be discreet. You can just put it down there. You know, it's not like a flipped up notebook, you know.
And I'll admit, my eventual plan on this, when they have the other room done and the projector's up and everything, I'll actually have part of the source material and stuff like that, where I'll just probably be spending half the time walking around with the iPad in my hand, so I can flip to the next slide and things like that.
Cool.
That way, nobody any longer will have to put up with my handwriting. I will admit, since the first time I did this up here, it has gotten better. But
we'll have to follow you around with the camera, cameraman.
Let's not.
You could use the camera on your iPad.
So it's
That's all I
selfie
see.
church.
The Church of the Self-Nation.
No.
Wow, you want to talk about some heresy right there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you've heard heresy come out of my mouth too.
No, never.
Never, nah. Don't ever look at any of my Facebook posts. Anyways, yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't find a good reference for that. But you had me curious. I'm gonna have to dig into that one of these days, because I don't really have like I said, I don't really have a thing that shows where God doesn't bother having to punish us directly. He just lets us do it to ourselves. In most of the Old Testament, it is very much a thing of, here's what I told you to do.
Here's what you did.
Here's what you did, and here's what I'm going to do to you. So, okay, so you can't behave. Fine. You're not going into the land. You know, that sort of thing. It's much more direct. However, we as a human species don't do subtlety well anyways. We are no better than a dog in some ways. Most people have to have a direct result from our actions before. You know, that's like, if you ever own a dog, the dog pees on the floor, you grab the dog. You can't do it 10 minutes from now. It has to be right now. Grab the dog, rub the dog's nose in the pee, and you take the dog outside. You say no. Or at least that's how some people do it. Other people do have different options. Anyways, we as a species tend to require that. So if we're going to write stories about it, we can't have big overall arcs that at the end, but it was us, and it was, in the end, the fault wasn't us. You know, no. We have to have immediate consequences for our actions.
I was just imagining trying that with a cat.
You like stitches, don't you?
No, I don't. I just imagining because I don't have a dog. I've got cats, and so I was like,
Oh no,
trying to rub a blender's nose. Okay, I'll stop.
Oh, no.
No, seriously, you like stitches, don't you? You're also the same guy who tries to give a cat a bath.
No, that's the cat's job.
Anyways. So what else? What else? I'm actually like full thing. Some days I put a whole bunch of material in here, and we don't actually get to it all.
Mhm.
And then today, well, you know, we're
chugging
it's
right
3:13, and
Well, one of the things I found really interesting in the Bible is that in some of the old stories in the Old Testament, things happened real fast. But there were other times where the prophets were sitting around going, come on, man, come on, you know, they're doing this, aren't you going to, like, smite them, you know?
true.
And so God was, like, way more patient than his servants were, and they were just like, no.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think Jonah's one of my favorites because it's like he's the emo, the emo prophet. He's like, I want to die.
No, you're right. I've never considered that before, but that's.
No, you better punish
I
these
know,
guys. I
but-
hate them. They should die. But if you're not gonna do it, you should kill me.
You just wearing black and
His bangs are down.
whoa.
So,
Everything is black.
so even though, you know, some of the other ones, I mean, Elijah and everything is really, really impressive, but Jonah just cracks me up so much. And I love that thing with the bush at the end of Jonah. There's, you know, there's everybody always makes the thing about the whale, and of course the whales or the sea monster or whatever the situation is, depending on how it's translated and what. But the whole situation, I mean, that's very unusual, and I'm sure, you know, a miraculous thing. But the end of the story is Jonah shows up, and of course the people that he didn't want to save repent and go ahead, and, you know, Nineveh is like, whoa, we will totally change. We will totally change our ways and do everything, and he's just really ticked off that the destruction
Been a
doesn't
mind
get
trip.
coming. And he just
Gee,
goes
damn
outside. Yeah, he just goes outside of town and lays down, and there's this shrub that grows, and it cuts down on the sunlight on him, and he's starting to relax and like it, and then God kills it. And then he's like pissed off. It's like super pissed off. He's like, I should just die. And then God's like, you know,
You want me to go stick my head in a bucket?
you know, this shrub, you didn't sow it, you didn't care for it, it just was. It just came along and you liked it, and then worms ate it. So, you know, how do you think you should feel about these people over here? There's gotten so many people over here that don't even know their left hand from their right, you know, and I should just destroy them? I just love that little interjection there. But, you know, because one of the things about it is the prophets were real, or at least read like real human beings.
Yeah.
You know, they're not all, you know, I mean, Jacob was hilarious. And he totally got screwed over, but he screwed people over first.
Yeah, the prophets weren't all. I always thought the prophets were all interesting because there ain't one of them that's not flawed, including to the point of, you know, breaking the biblical rules, and with consequences. I see quoted from time to time that they didn't have consequences. Actually, they did. But yeah, all of them were flawed. All of them are flawed. None of them are perfect. You know, you have the picture of Jesus, who's absolutely perfect.
Mhm.
He's the only one. Everybody else, no. Moses stuttered.
And
Moses,
murdered the Egyptian.
so what?
And murdered the Egyptian.
Murdered the Egyptian. Didn't follow rules. Questioned God. Debated with God. Actually, I always thought that was a great model. Because there wasn't any consequences for him debating with God.
Mhm.
On the other hand, when he lost his temper, finally said, "Fine," smacks the rock with a stick. Okay, you're done. You're done. You can't go in there. But the list of flaws that all these guys have always makes it. I mean, we should always take that as being a good thing for us. Well, gee, if they could be flawed and they get books about them, maybe we're all right. Hopefully that's the case. So we'll not get into my flaws. I'm not plenty of them.
Dude, I'd have a whole series.
Well, and also Israel, wasn't it like wrestling with God?
Mhm.
I mean, it was an angel and it was at night and everything, but wasn't that the point of the name or something?
Yes, wrestles with God. That is actually absolutely right. Which is interesting because Kat would love to talk about this because she finds amusement in it. I'm not sure amusement's the right term, but she always finds it interesting that the name changes back and forth because it doesn't eliminate his original name.
Mhm.
Israel is mentioned in certain contexts. Sometimes it's not. So it's interesting that, and I've seen people say that they, well, it's because of this, but I've never found a formula that really fits perfectly for that. So, yeah. Which, of course, he also apparently, when you wrestle with God, you also end up with permanent hip damage too. So,
Yeah.
walk around with a cane for the rest of your days.
Yes, but doing it as a badass.
Well, that's
So
true.
the
I'm going to give him
same
points for that.
that was a pretty cool story.
And he was and he was not a good guy, really. I mean, it's been interesting that he was chosen to continue on the line because he's really not that good of a guy.
And he was chosen like before he was born.
Yeah.
The person was telling her this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of funny with the whole. He screwed over his brother. Like twice, like super screwed him over. Like
I want your inheritance. Yeah.
Yeah, for a bowl of soup.
I've been hungry, but never that hungry.
Yeah, and then he got to go have life and figure out how bad that was.
Yeah.
Because his uncle.
Oh, it's that good, huh?
Well, I mean, he favored his mom, right? He was the one that hung out in the tents and blah blah blah. It's not just like, oh no, you like your mom, you're just terrible.
Mommy's boy.
If his personality was shaped at all by his mom, then it's probably no big surprise that his uncle, who grew up in the same house as his mom did, would be a little tricky too. So Then he went in and worked for his uncle for 14 years because he thought after 7 years he'd get the girl, Rachel, but his uncle married Leah to him instead.
With some trickery.
Yes, with the trickery. And then when he was older, Joseph, one of his favorite sons, he had two, and they were both Rachel's sons, was supposedly killed by animals because his sons tricked him.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you just look at his life, there were consequences.
That's true.
But it wasn't immediately.
You're right, because usually I think of most of the stuff as being very immediate, but that was definitely a very long-term reap what you sow situation. He lived a dishonest life.
Early on.
Apparently some of that got passed on to his kids.
Yeah.
And eventually it came back to him. You're right. Of course, in the end, it did have some pretty beneficial effects, too. But
oh, yeah. In the end, there was a happy story, and there was all this adventure that happened in the meantime. But it was what was happening was kind of related to what he'd done. still, you know, it wasn't the, see, we seem to have this idea that that everything is death, you know, that sin equals death, and then people seem to have this idea that it's immediate. And I mean, I guess it can be. I mean, there's a lot of things that are sins that are just really stupid.
Well, when it comes to judgment, Old Testament, you ended up with a lot of immediate judgments. I mean, okay, everybody's gonna stick their sword at hip high and run through there, and kill about 3,000 people out of Moses' camp. Some of those were immediate, and some of them the wages of sin is death. Is not supposed to mean immediate. It's not supposed to mean. It's actually not even supposed to be a physical thing. Wages of sin is death. It's actually well, it depends on who you talk to. Wages of sin is death. It's actually usually in some people's mind is an afterlife thing. Is a matter of you do not get the eternal life at that point, which brings up some of the thought that some souls don't pass on, blah blah blah, which a whole another ball of wax there. But yeah, a lot of people take that whole thing, that death and life, to be immediate blessings or immediate curses, and not necessarily so. You know, and if we were to say that they were or were not, we're saying that we know God a whole lot better than we really do, anyways. So something you brought up, just kind of a random, that puts us back on the original topic. Not that it matters that much, but because like with Israel ended up reaping what he sowed. He did these things early in life. We don't really actually know, for the most part, how good or bad of a person he was when it comes to his sons. It's really at that point he's now become the background character, and we move on. But the question becomes, in the end, yeah, he paid a price, but a lot of good come of that at the end.
Well, God can make good things come out of anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So one of my questions comes back to going back to our original, global warming and eco-stewardship and things like that. Is there good that could come out of this? If we got global warming going on now and we apply ourselves to improve the situation, is there good that comes on it? Beyond the obvious, okay, we don't broil to death.
Might foster better relations between the nations. We might get along better.
Well, and actually that's not a bad thought, because I mean there's
everyone's gonna have to work together.
There's a long-standing comment when it comes to the Middle East about these, and some people object to this. I do not. I actually kind of like this phrase about why the Middle East is such a problem, and this is the most simplified version of it ever. It's hot and there's no water, and it might sound a joke, but it's actually a lot of their stuff is over religion and resources. Resources actually ends up being more important. We think it's about religion a lot of times, when actually it's about resource wars. So let's say we clean things up a little bit, and for instance, let's say we get things cleaned up to the point that there is a little bit of climate change in their area, and you end up with more rain. It might be a friendlier area. Who knows? I don't know. It's hot and there's no water. I always love that one to describe why the Middle East is always at war, one way or another. What are the positive effects? We get along better because we have to work together towards a global solution.
We'll learn to work together, not have to. The ice caps will melt, and we'll find Atlantis again.
If the ice caps melt, just the opposite. You get 28 more feet of water.
You get more Atlantises. You get, like,
no, I mean, we might.
More cities underwater.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
We get tourist destinations for scuba diving.
From a geological standpoint, though, I mean, Greenland is the land mass below the ice is as low as it is because the ice on top of it weighs so much. Britain used to be the same way, we think, but during the Ice Age, because there was so much pushing down on it, once the ice melted, it rose back up. There's geological evidence for that.
Yeah. It's an interesting point I hadn't thought of.
So, it's just trying to be geeky.
Let your geek flag fly. You with your +5 shirt of protection.
Yeah.
See, I almost wish I had a camera up here just so I could just 1 or 2 shots of a couple of people. Except for my wife, who has no appreciation for that.
Oh.
I'm not allowed to put her on camera. She does not allow that. I am. What else? So theoretically, we could learn to work together. What else we got? What are the beneficial effects we can get from it?
Well, of course, the whole getting more land mass out of it. I mean, it's just different land mass.
New and exciting beachfront properties.
In Arizona.
We are getting a grizzly polar bear mix out of it.
That's true, because we're losing the polar bears at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a very exciting discovery.
Bears. Well, think about this. The grizzly bear's attitude with a polar bear's body. Don't they call it a Kodiak?
Polar bears aren't particularly cuddly anyway.
No. They just look cuddly because they're white and pretty.
They're not like that.
Yeah, they're clear.
Whoa, well, excuse me.
Right.
You're right, though. It is clear, which is funny when they start getting algae on them. You get green polar bears. What else? I'm going to throw in better resource management, because if we're doing things like reducing our carbon footprint, that means that we've found some way to, for instance, to do so actually is a lot more difficult. People keep saying reduce your carbon footprint. We either need to do less stuff or find a better way of providing power to vehicles, things like that. The Tesla is great, for instance. So what?
Nothing.
You don't like the Tesla?
No, I was going to say, we'll get rid of people. Do less stuff, or...
Well,
that just came out, I'm sorry.
There is a whole set of theory that we're actually over top of the practical amount of people that we can have on Earth, and if we were to remove a couple of billion of them, I'm not really a fan of this plan.
Yeah,
Because I'm thinking I'm probably going to be on the part removed. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I'm in the U.S.
Longer
But
growing season.
I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing.
I don't think so either.
I think the whole thing was go forth and multiply, not go ahead and subtract and divide.
But we're also supposed to, manage the...
Well, and we're, yeah.
I was sorry. Longer growing seasons as a positive effect. If we were able to wrangle it and get it under control, but now it's warmer and we can't do anything about it. More food for the multitudes that are already here.
Yes, theoretically, if we got things under control, we could end up with a longer growing season. And if we don't let the effect continue to run away. The problem is right now, is like for instance, Kansas. Yeah, okay, we got pretty good length of time. The problem is when our water comes is at the wrong time of the year right now. We're supposed to get dang near a monsoon in April, which we didn't. We got that in June and July for a little bit. It's the wrong spot, the wrong time. And actually there's a whole bit that I could go into about the rains and the winds coming into Israel at the right time. I can't remember.
And then with the longer growing season where? Because if it's longer growing in Canada, then you end up with a desert in Mexico.
That's true. That's true.
So you're just growing your crops in a different place.
What else we got?
I was trying to think positive.
You're trying to make the best of it. Actually, I'm thinking along the lines of personally, kind of going back to better resource management. As we clean up our act, if we improve things. Right now, we're running out of things quite frequently. We're having to recycle more. We're having to deal with. We're already starting to learn the idea of some resource management. We're recycling. Hey, it's cool that I've got a bin now that I can dump all of my recyclable stuff, my paper, my plastic, certain plastics, my glass, my aluminum, my metals, and they go take it and they turn it into. Well, they charge me for that bin, but they go make some money off of it by recycling it back around. Things like fossil fuels and stuff that we use that kind of got us here to a certain degree, got us here in the first place. I won't blame it all on fossil fuels. Are not recyclable. You use them up once, and you can't,
Can't unburn a match.
Yeah, no. It's a one-way process. If we got ourselves into situations where we realize that and start using resources that we can continue to recycle, solar cells, for instance, are to a certain degree a recyclable resource. As long as the sun doesn't burn out, we've always got more sun coming in. Then it just becomes a matter of we put the cells in when they've aged off to a certain age and become inefficient. We recycle them. We put new ones in. Continue the process over and over. Take the silicone out, et cetera, et cetera. Silicon. Any other thoughts?
Well, they have been encouraging people to grow things again.
That's actually
Grow gardens, not lawns.
so what?
Grow gardens, not lawns.
Yeah, oh man, I'm a huge fan of that one.
And with gardens on top of skyscrapers, etc.
Local resourcing is part of it. I mean, another way you could say it. But I'm a huge fan of this. We are not doing this at our house right now for various reasons. But I don't believe in lawns. I've got one sitting
No. You have a yard.
A lawn would be a nicely manicured
Yes,
thing.
there's nothing
It's
cultivated
green.
whatsoever on our property.
We threw seeds out there once.
There's nothing
turkey.
cultivated. No, literally, they were tossed.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll add some water later. We spend a lot of water on most people. We do. We, my wife and I, spend none on watering the lawn because then I got to mow it more often. If I got to mow it more often.
Mower.
So what?
With a gasoline mower.
With a gasoline mower. So the whole cycle. It's actually almost all vanity. People want to have a nice looking lawn. They have a high resale house or what have you. It doesn't really do much good otherwise. On the other hand, if I were to grow my entire front lawn and garden, I'd be pretty happy actually. There's some areas because of a tree I can't grow in, but I'd be pretty happy personally. And it makes more sense. I could grow more on my front lawn than her and I could eat for most of the year.
Okay, definitely.
When it comes to vegetables. So that I would have, right down the way is the Lord's Diner. Take that and feed the hungry. I mean, there's so much more I can do with that. So yes, that is very much on my list of things that could be pretty awesome ideas. But the other thing is, it also means I'm not spending gas to go get groceries every week, or at least not all of it. I can go buy meats, throw them in the freezer, and handle my vegetables locally. So yeah, it's actually a really good idea.
Well, we also eat a lot of meat. And
Yes.
I mean, there are places that don't eat meat at all, but we like factory farm our meat, and if we were growing more vegetables, maybe would not quite drink so much meat. I hate to use that, but
I am very much a meat
just
person.
eat it all.
I am a steak person. Steak person, big time. On the other hand, I could stand to eat a lot less than I do, really. And when I grew up, there was a cow lot behind us, grass-fed cows, and we had one of our own.
Ranch, not a cow lot.
Well, you're right. It's not a feedlot.
It's a difference.
Well, it's a
Well, there was a lot of cows.
There's a bunch of cows.
But yeah, feedlots have a lot more environmental issues than Bob raising a herd of cows.
They smell too. You don't want to live next to one. Or Garden City or some of those places.
Oh, no.
So what?
So, no, you're going to have Garden City up in arms against you.
They know their town.
We didn't mean any insult. Garden City is awesome.
It's a lovely place to smell. I mean,
Wow. See, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I had nothing to do with that.
nice place to live.
Oh, man.
Yes, you're right. Well, and we are very much on the X. I'm not saying anything, but we are on the excesses a lot of times. We've gotten so used to being able to have meats and cheap protein and et cetera, et cetera.
And it's subsidized.
Yes, yes. So we could
We're
stay.
encouraged. We're
Yeah.
encouraged to eat lots of meat.
Well, because if we don't eat lots of meat, those guys over there don't make money. If those guys over there don't make money, then there actually is this juggling act with all of that. We could do better. We could do much better. But we don't. And the conservative side of how we do things will prevent us, because I don't want to eat less meat. I'm saying this quite honestly. I don't want to eat less meat. I like the amount of meat I eat. As long as people think like I do, it won't change. We gotta.
But conservatively, we didn't used to eat this much meat.
Well, you're right, and then there is a question right there. At what point is it traditional and conservative, and what point is it no longer?
It used to be the thing they did for Sundays as a special day, that they'd have a family get together and there would be meat.
Yeah, particularly pre-refrigeration, because you couldn't cut up a whole lot of meat and have it just
Lying around.
lying around. I got a tray of chicken that I buy from Sam's that I just stick in the freezer. I want chicken, I pull it out. Couldn't used to do that. It meant that I'd have to go out and chop the head off chicken, dunk the chicken in the boiling water.
But would you eat less meat if you had to chop off the head of the chicken?
Oh heck yeah!
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of chopping the head off. Chopping the head off a chicken is only the start. All the rest of it goes into that.
But we don't seem to value animals if we don't use them for something. So that's one of the funny things. I've really seen that we poison birds that are just birds because they're eating our crops. We'll just kill them all. It's just crazy.
Well, and we find wildlife to be.
How dare you exist?
Well, yeah. Okay.
Inconvenience.
Funny, inconvenience. That's a great term for it, because a great example of this is I owned a goose in Wichita. It's a long story. I owned 2 ducks and a goose. Yes, duck, goose. And the thing was, one year, I don't know why, the Honey Plaza Mall, is that the name of it? I can't remember which one it was. Decided that they didn't like geese anymore. So what they started doing was they were inconvenienced by these geese who were getting up on the roof. So they started playing the sound over loudspeakers of geese that had been injured to try and dissuade the geese from being there. Now, I did not live like next door to this thing. I lived about 7 blocks away. So I step out my back porch and go, what creature is dying? What the heck? Drove around and I'm going, what in the world? So I ended up finding out it was the stupid mall because they didn't want geese around. They were inconvenienced by these wild creatures who go through twice a year, coming and going. Yeah, we find any animal that we don't have immediate use for to be inconvenient, or worse, you know. And I'll admit, I find mice to be highly inconvenient. I will poison them, or trap them, or kill them if they're in my house. Otherwise, I don't care if they're outside. It doesn't matter to me. But a lot of people, that's very much, you know, you're very right. We don't, if we can't eat it directly, we don't care. It's actually worse than not care. So I think we're probably going to wrap it up because it is 3. Hang on just a second. I'm so supposed to actually watch this thing from time to time because people can comment. Somebody commented on this. Hi, Harvey. We butchered our own chickens, didn't slow down our meat consumption. I even helped butcher a cow once. That's an interesting point for some people. Now, Harvey's from a very large family, so I don't know if that matters.
A lot of help.
Well, it changes the way you do things. My folks are older, and my mom said growing up they'd have meat like twice a week. Chickens or rabbits, depending on how the hunt went. Whereas my dad worked on they were farmers. They had meat every meal.
Gotcha.
But, it kind of goes to city slicker versus country folk thing. My mom grew up in town for all 300 people, but she grew up in town and her dad was not a farmer. So, literally availability. But when it's right there in the barn, it changes that. But like the entire city of Wichita, if you had to take care of your own meat, if it walked in clucking, how many people would go hungry? How would that change? I work with people who would never cut the head off a chicken because that's just gross. Starve then, just so there becomes in mass what people choose to do, how hard they want to work for their food.
Well, and you're right. Modern society, we've become so abstracted from our food sources that I think the people that right now at this moment would go, ooh, yuck, I wouldn't kill a chicken. I would cut the head off. You give them about, a month, and they'll probably start thinking the chicken looks like a great idea after all, and start asking the question. So, how do I do this? Do I stroke it and pet it before I put it to sleep? Do I strangle it? They would start asking the questions.
Right.
So what?
Do I wait for night?
and there's something to be said too with the difference between agriculture and city folk, because even 100 years ago, if you lived in town, what chores did children do? You didn't even have to draw water sometimes. And then the country folk had to do everything longhand.
Yeah.
My grandmother never learned to drive the car. She was an excellent list keeper because somebody else was probably going to go to the grocery store. So, my dad was milking cows, at 6 years old. Nowadays, that would be completely frowned upon. So just kind of a little bit more work ethic related on how you get your food. Because, what did, if you were a city slicker 100 years ago and you were 5 years old, you were probably looking at going to school and or having a governess rather than doing something.
I wouldn't necessarily call it work ethic. I would call it necessity. And from where you were born and how you lived and what time you lived in. But I wouldn't say, like modern city dwellers have any less of a work ethic when it comes, to like getting their food. It's just they don't have to. It's not necessary.
You're a city slicker, aren't you? No, I'm kind of messing with it.
Well, you're right. Perhaps that was not the best.
No, I wasn't insinuating that you were, insulting or anything. I was just, saying that.
Well, and then the entire class system, whether or not we choose to admit that we have one.
We do.
No.
don't tell the government.
No.
You have to set it up. The entire class system, the redneck jokes are there for a reason. They worked rather than getting an education, because if they didn't go milk the cow, nobody had milk. Nobody. Not them, but nobody. Whereas then you end up with the people who lived in town and didn't have to milk because daddy was a lawyer. They were the ones who were going to school to be the next generation of lawyers and buying the milk. So it was kind of, trading off who had the money, but definitely very much a class system. Not to say that either one is better or worse.
They're different.
But they're very different, but they cause codependency. There's very much a Venn diagram. So, but
no one's going to buy the milk, there's, less need to milk it except for your own subsistence.
Yeah, and then you won't ever have money to buy anything else, and so you'll have a milk cow and no clothes.
It does, and in this discussion, it does make me wonder for a moment, how many people could actually say where their food comes from and what the process for them to get to their, be it McDonald's or onto their dinner plate. How many people actually know the process that has gone on through there?
I would say less than 20%.
I don't know.
And it depends on where. I think, for instance, those in New York City would be
further abstract,
less aware.
Yeah.
Their food appears on their plates.
Yeah, and then there's places. When we drove through Colby, they know exactly which field their cow came from to make their
know
steak.
which cow it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of where you got to get with the class system. How New York City doesn't have cows. They don't. It's okay.
Liz and I actually we lament the fact that we don't have to, and because we don't have to, raise grow vegetables and raise livestock and do it, we are less likely to actually do it. Now, of course, we live in an apartment, which makes it even harder. We can have little pots of plants and stuff and no animals, and we would love to be in a position to where we could farm a decent, a decent acreage and have animals running around and not have to worry about relying on other people bringing food to us. But it's just it's where we were born,
Yeah.
It's kind of, I wouldn't say trapped, but it's. If you want to actually pick up and move to another country because you don't like it here, you got to have money to do that. It's the same thing with any situation you're in.
Right.
You have to have the resources to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the foreseeable future, Davis and I will have some acreage. We won't have a cow.
No cow?
Okay.
What about a yak?
Goats, perhaps, because I hate mowing.
Goats are wonderful.
Goats,
And,
yeah,
goat milk is gay.
And he asked for everything. Sorry.
Rabbits.
We don't eat rabbit.
Don't you have it?
That's not on the approved food list.
Okay.
We do. We actually, and this is one of those things, we eat biblically clean. However, you don't really hear us mention that much because everybody just does their own thing anyways. We follow the rules from Leviticus, which basically boils down to that cow looks really good and we can eat it. There's a couple other split hoof and choose cud animals that we can eat. Beyond that, not so much. No pigs, so we don't do tasty bacon or any of that stuff.
No paws.
Nothing with paws.
Nothing with paws. Okay.
Yeah.
They make duck bacon.
Duck
It's
bacon.
delicious.
Yes.
Really?
Make turkey
Yes.
bacon.
Duck
too.
bacon.
Duck
See,
bacon.
Turkey bacon is slightly less delicious than duck bacon. It's because of the amount and the quality of fat on duck breast.
Yeah, because duck's got quite a bit is kind of greasy.
Yeah, it's kind of greasy. It cooks really, really fast. You got to keep turning it until it gets crispy and everything. But it's cured, but it's not smoked. It's
We've
right
lived
there.
quite well without.
You have intrigued me, sir. I'm
It
actually
would
not
be
a
a
huge.
treat.
Well, my whole thing was I got tired of bacon anyways. Honestly, when I could not order a cheeseburger without bacon on it anymore, I'm done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they put bacon on everything. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to
They
eat
put it
green
on
beans. Why is there
pies.
bacon on it?
Chocolate pies.
Yeah, ice cream. It's great. I like bacon, but then again, I don't eat bacon all the time. It's like maybe once every 3 months I'll buy a pack of bacon and fry it up. But when I do that, it's eaten immediately.
there's no leftovers.
But that's probably because I don't eat it every day.
Well, that's true too.
But yeah, but we'd have, goats and plenty of vegetables, and chickens. And, more than what we would be able to consume by all means.
Kangaroos.
Well, one of the things that
I'm
I
just
think
naming animals.
biblically there's a lot to be said for abundance, because he's always like, my cup overflows, and there's parts where the prophets are like, if you go ahead and you repent and you stop doing this evil stuff, and you just watch, I will fill the land with abundance. Go ahead and you'll see the rains. There's plenty of assurances of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Trickle down chicken
it's
donuts.
not that having an abundance itself is bad. It's that having an abundance and starving these people over here and eating bacon in front of starving people is bad.
Right.
Well, and that's another one of those areas where you can go into a topic all into its own. The last much longer than the amount of time we got left, because you're right. We're a society of waste of all sorts. Man, how much food do we waste? I mean, a lot
of the carbon going into the air is the decomposing food in our.
So yeah, we have a situation where we throw so much away, but yet we have such a problem with the guy on the corner who hasn't eaten for the last 2 days, and we won't hand anything to him, but we'll throw the cheeseburger away later.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually legally disallowed from doing, like businesses are legally disallowed from doing much of anything with food when it's gotten beyond a certain date, when it's gotten beyond a certain
and they just have to throw it right in the trash.
And some of it is just like ridiculous, because even like you were talking about donating to the Lord's Diner that's so close to us.
Yeah.
The rigmarole that we would have to go through, because we'd have to have an FDA approved kitchen to can vegetables and give them to somebody.
Oh, I was talking about just give them the box of raw, because you're absolutely right. We can't can them and hand them to somebody else. Not any. You can to your neighbor, but to hand it to the Lord's Diner, they wouldn't be able to use it.
Yeah.
None of the food pantries could.
Yeah.
Those rules are designed to safeguard us, especially safeguard us. Oddly enough, the rules are designed to safeguard us from people who were fairly evil in the past. And if you ever want a good example of why some of the rules exist, read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. There was people that were really, really bad, took advantage of the system, make a lot of people sick, and now we have rules that apply to everyone that unfortunately help us waste some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But we're still putting sulfur in our mac and cheese.
Yes.
For coloring.
It won't taste.
Not even for
it
good
won't
reason.
Taste the same without it. Well, let's face it. Most people don't know what color mayonnaise is supposed to be. Mayonnaise is kind of green snot. Real mayonnaise, when it was used to be made, would look like green snot.
A little bit yellow.
I was thinking,
It was originally the oil. The oil, when it emulsified with the egg in it, it was the oil itself. When you spun it, would turn kind of a grayish. Then you added the egg, and you'd end up with more of a green result than the yellow result.
Mom's was always a little bit yellow.
It may depend on what oil she used too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But that was then. We don't actually. There's no egg involved in most people's mayonnaise anymore, anyways, not unless you home make it. So, anyways, tasty mayonnaise.
It's Forto.
Sorry.
Yes. I suppose we should call it a day. Thank you for anybody out there watching us. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week, somewhere between 2:10, 2:15, 2:20 if Windows decides it needs to install drivers again, 2:30 if Windows decides it needs to install drivers and crash. So, anyways, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. God bless.